Welcome to the Live Up podcast, where we revisit the movies from our youth to see if they live up. We're going to review and discuss the movie in question and then score whether the movie lives up to us now as adults, and then whether it lives up to its intended audience, whether that's kid or teens. I'm Jess Latterman.
And I'm Amanda Treat. Today, we're reviewing a film that almost made topiaries cool. From the dark, magical mind of Tim Burton, it's 1990's Edward Scissorhands. This one was my pick, and what do you think, Jess? Was this a good pick?
I think it was. It was a good pick. I was looking forward to recording this. When I watched it, I enjoyed being delighted about all the things I forgot happened in this movie and just even who was in this movie. So it was a good pick. I think it's always the perfect pick when you just don't remember parts of it, but you remember loving it as a kid. So since you picked this, so why'd you pick it? What's your deal with Edward Scissorhands?
I have a memory of loving this movie, so I was excited to watch this again. When it came out, I remember going to see it in the theater with my mom and my sister, and I think it came out the same year as The Addams Family. We were in the same exact movie theater that we saw that in, but it was kind of this whole film
Amanda
era.
Treat, aka Wednesday Addams. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, it was like a time where you were rooting for kooky people in castles to go to battle with their suburban neighbors. And I was totally here for that.
It's so weird that was a theme in 1990, but here we are.
Yeah, the good guys live in the big creepy castle. I remember as a kid, I'd already seen all these Tim Burton movies that had come out prior. So like definitely that Batman movie that was huge at the time, and Beetlejuice definitely, and even Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which we'll review at some point because I know
Large
we
Marge.
both have thoughts on Large Marge.
Yep.
But definitely not After the Dark Crystal. We can't do
that
back to back on that. Too much.
Listeners, you'll have to wait on Large Marge and Pee-wee.
But yeah, Edward Scissorhands. I probably haven't seen this movie in the last 10, 12, 15 years, but I do have the DVD of it. So I went and found it on my shelf and blew the dust off the top of it. And we had a little neighborhood viewing party of Edward Scissorhands. It was great.
So the DVD though, like,
oh yeah,
is this DVD an artifact from the 90s that you have in your possession?
This is probably an artifact from my 20s shopping at Target or something.
It was in the bargain bin at Target.
Yeah, maybe. You also saw this as a child, and what's your memory of it?
I did. So your memory always impresses me. You're able to conjure more details in a way that I can't. So I definitely saw this in the theater. I was definitely aware that this was a, air quotes, people, Tim Burton movie. And I kind of knew that meant it's going to be weird, but that I'd probably like it. And I was also aware, I think that what's a key thing is that Johnny Depp and Winona Ryder were really like a thing of the 90s. I think I was more aware of Johnny Depp at the time. That is context. So between the two of them being in it and it's Tim Burton, I remember thinking I knew I was going to like it. And we didn't own the VHS or DVD, but it was definitely on the rotation when we went to Blockbuster, because I remember seeing this so much in my preteen years. So I'm actually surprised at how much I forgot about the movie. But for anyone who hasn't seen the movie in years or maybe at all, so Edward Scissorhands, it's the story of a man-made man, maybe, with scissors for hands, who then inexplicably agrees to move to the burbs with an Avon Lady. And then chaos ensues. I mean,
as it does when you go with an Avon Lady. You got to be careful there.
Got to be careful. Don't just readily agree to be like, sure, I'll live with you, Avon Lady.
We're going to get phone calls from Avon being like, hey, we're still a business and we don't kidnap monsters from their houses.
But are they a business? I mean, well, I actually wonder what Avon thought of this movie.
They must have signed off on it.
They must have.
They're all over this movie.
That's what this movie is. I don't think that's not, as a marketer, how I would present this movie. But that's essentially the summary.
Yeah, you captured the charm. That was wonderful. So one of the things I noticed and loved so much more watching this as an adult is that clearly Tim Burton has come to take a shot at the kind of suburb he grew up in, 1960s Burbank, California. And When Tim Burton takes his shot at the suburbs, he does not miss.
Yeah, I didn't. It's like I knew that somewhere in the back of my mind, but I had forgotten that that's like his thing. Yeah.
Like the second we got into the suburbs with those pastel colored houses and the manicured lawns, it like hit me in the stomach. Like it looks like a dystopian hellscape of pastel. It is hideous.
Stepford Wife, like.
Oh my God. And like the people's clothes, you know, like we see the opening shot of the Avon Lady and she is in this like Easter bunny, lilac, purple, hideous head to toe outfit. Just rocking it, I guess. Not really. Like everybody's clothes are awful. All the food in this is just like food coloring galore. The jello molds are just wiggling all over the place. I mean,
and what is an ambrosia salad? I mean, we'll get to that, I guess, but like, what the fuck is that? It's not, it looks and sounds as disgusting as it probably tastes.
I think there's marshmallows in it, but we're gonna have to Google this to get the official recipe. Like,
listeners, tell us if you've had ambrosia salad.
This movie makes the suburbs look disgusting. They are revolting, and that is where we're starting this movie. Jess, what did you think about the setting of Edward Scissorhands?
Yeah, so I mean, I have a lot of observations about suburb commentary in this movie, and I also couldn't place quite what year it was supposed to be. Like, at first, is this supposed to take place in the 60s? But they reference CDs, so I was sort of confused at the timing. Not that that really mattered or took away from anything, but yeah, no, the suburbs definitely were painted as like part Stepford Wives, part almost a pre-social media but bullying type social media that just looked awful. However, I would love to live there. I mean,
conformity in the neighborhood is just, oh, they're cliquey, they're mean. It's like a bunch of mean girls and a bunch of mansplaining guys. Like, oh,
true,
awful people.
I mean, that being said, I was sort of like, I'd like to live there with my popcorn and sit out on the lawn and watch all the chaos ensuing. I think that looks like a lot of fun. But no, I thought the setting was really interesting. I did have to explain what an answering machine was to my children.
Let me say, we had a little neighborhood watch party and my neighbors came over. Shout out to Kathleen and Matt, and especially 8-year-old Bella, because she was the one who was like, what is that, when the answering machine went off?
Oh, yeah.
But there was a lot of things we were just like, that's a waterbed. That was a thing.
Yes, like, I forgot. Yeah, we had to explain that too.
Yeah, she was like, it was full of water. And yeah, we were explaining you have to heat that up and just, all the different things, from the slip and slide to the popcorn ceiling, wall-to-wall carpet, like all of these super suburban things that are just out of style now.
And I think just the general idea that you had to calling someone on a phone to gossip. I mean, the idea of gossip is over the head of my 6-year-old anyway. But for my 11-year-old, she was just sort of like, what are they doing? Because it was this weird, like almost in real life mob mentality that just, I'm sure it does still happen these days.
Well, but we were explaining, like, this is what texting was before.
Right?
There were
exactly.
Like, they got on the phone and they left a message on the answering machine that you had to rewind and play.
Right. And you're calling someone to be like, did you just see whatever? Instead of like posting some bullshit on Nextdoor. Like, you're actually talking to a human. So in some ways, there's some nostalgic quality of like, oh, neighborhood gossip is so much better than social media.
Remember when we used to do it in person to people's faces?
Yeah, remember we used to all call each other, and then like in there's one scene in particular, really right at the beginning, when Edward comes home with Peg. Edward, played by Johnny Depp. Peg, played the Avon Lady, played by Diane. Is it Diane Wiest?
I've always said it Diane Wiest.
Diane Wiest.
I think that's how it's pronounced.
Right. So Peg / Diane Wiest is, brings Edward home. The whole neighborhood starts going lights up, basically in real life group text, and then at some point shows up on their doorstep like, so what time's the barbecue? And they essentially just like ambush Peg. And
group
there was
text.
something. And I thought that it was sort of funny, like in terms of like the best offline way to basically have a social media mob mentality. I don't know. So there's something
before there was emojis, you had to make those faces at people in front of their face,
or at least emote while you're on a phone that has a cord attached to a wall. But I guess I'd say like overall, like, oh my God, neighbors is a huge theme in this movie. I mean, it's the neighbors who welcome, who are intrigued. Then they like, there's some social currency with Edward Scissorhands. And then when the neighbors turn, they are the villains.
Oh,
So
they're literally the mob. They're just missing the pitchforks and the torches, but they are the mob.
they are the mob. And so I think maybe watching it as an adult, that's not a theme I picked up on when I was a preteen or 10-year-old watching this movie. But I'm pretty sure my 11-year-old did pick up on those themes for sure. But yeah, no, that's that the suburbs are weird. And I guess they are. And maybe I was sort of wondering about this in the 90s. I'm totally like going on and on about suburbs, but like, was by 1990, there's a whole Tim Burton's like own experience with the suburbs, but then was America just sort of like done with the 50s and 60s dream of the burbs and they were just like bored out of their mind? And that's why in 90s movies you have all these like suburbs or hellscape type of movies. Like,
I don't know. I mean, I think you and I grew up in a different type of suburbs. Like this very flat, all the houses are identical suburbs that he's depicting, which I think is really what Burbank, California used to
yeah,
look
it might
like.
be more specific to California. Yeah.
I mean, my neighborhood, it was hilly. There was a lot of trees. You couldn't see directly into your neighbor's house the same way. Like their windows are literally at eye level. You can look across the street or out the side window and see
Yeah.
into your neighbor's house. We didn't have that level of intrusion from our neighbors. So it wasn't that kind of suburb. And I don't think because of, I'm going to say the hills, there wasn't like a flat corner you could have every single neighbor gather on and gossip on.
In my mind, it's almost like a cartoon version of the suburbs. Like it's like, did that ever even exist? Maybe it did in the 60s in California.
I feel like I see that like when they build those new, I don't even know what you call them, but like they'll like take a plot of land and put one road in, do like a little loop and then build all the identical houses around it. And like they've been McMansions lately, but I think this was the predecessor to that. Like I do think this exists, but
Yeah.
we just didn't experience that when we were in the 90s.
What I did experience, and I don't know if this is common, but there's always that house, right? There, and it's not as extreme as a castle that an inventor lives in, like an Edward
Oh, I feel
Scissorhands.
like we had that in my, like you go up the top of the hill and there was that house up
There's
there.
that house. It's that house that like whether the dogs scare you or it's creepy, like I feel like every neighborhood has one. So I guess going all the way back to like Boo Radley in a way. Yeah, we had one in our neighborhood, and I'll just briefly share that, like, you know, the dogs bark too much. And when I would go for a run, I just like would run faster past this one house. And it was sort of the creepy house. And then, you know, years later, I guess I was an adult at this point, my mom forwards me like a news article, or either my mom or someone from high school. And the people who lived there were keeping things like cheetahs and leopards in their house.
Whoa.
And like chained
That's
up and
actually
stuff.
way better than where I thought you were going with that. I thought there were going to be a few heads in the freezer.
Oh, yeah. No, I think that there were bad things like abuse and things, but there were not human remains. But yeah, no, crazy shit.
Man.
And I'm like, and of course that house, you know, I knew something was wrong with that house. Get out my pitchfork. Like,
oh man, I got nothing to compare to that. There was a big gothic creepy house up the top of the hill where the lightning rod or the lightning post was, and every lightning storm that rod got like struck and there was a huge crash through the neighborhood. But my only memory of that house was we tried to trick or treat at it once, and the guy who opened the door was like 120 years old, looked like the crypt keeper. We were like, trick or treat. And he was just like, what day is it? And we're like, oh God, did we just wake him up from a 100-year nap?
Right. Like he's probably like, what year is it?
You're good. Ichabod, go back to sleep.
What did you think of the toxic neighbors with their pitchforks? And
they're like a mix because it's such a like groupthink attitude going on here. So when they're with him, they're super with him. And then like there's a scene where Edward Scissorhands gets in a bit of trouble with the police and like they actually rescue him. But at that moment it turns. And once they turn on him, yeah, they're really the angry mob with, you know, they don't have literal pitchforks, but they're all dressed in Christmassy red and
but when they're with him, they're really with him. They all want their
Yeah.
hair cut by him. They want their, like, I don't know if folks remember all the different garden sculptures that Edward cuts with his hands, and everybody, it's almost a status symbol of like,
so many topiaries.
right. Yeah, exactly.
No,
He's
they're
making cool.
encouraging him to like start a business. They're taking him to the bank. They're helping him get his scissors sharpened in one scene.
Right.
It's like, they'll be very good neighbors until they're not.
Until they're not. I forgot how much the neighbors turn on him. I can't believe I had forgotten this, but I was almost surprised again watching being like, oh, I remember how this goes. Oh no.
Oh, public opinion.
Yes.
Oh God. We're all gonna turn on Johnny Depp, and oh wait, we're all turning back.
I know.
Amber Heard is the culprit.
But in the meantime, I was sort of delighting in it in a way. In all
they're
of the
vicious.
ridiculousness. Yeah,
it's so petty and so stupid. I do want to reference back to when I was a student at Emerson College way back when, they had this book in the library called Burton on Burton, because they had all the books about film. So it was like a director giving kind of a autobiographical interview about themselves. So they have Burton on Burton with Tim Burton talking about his directing influences. What stuck with me, so this character, he didn't write the script. The script is written by the great Carolyn Thompson, who also wrote The Addams Family and like so many of our other favorite movies from this era. She is awesome. She gets all the kudos. But this is actually an original character that he came up with, that when he was in high school, he used to draw pictures of himself with scissors hands because he was so awkward around other people that he felt like he couldn't be near them. He couldn't like touch other people. Like he was so unwanted and like repelling people. And if you look at it, like Edward Scissorhands or Johnny Depp as Edward Scissorhands looks like a young Tim Burton.
He kind of does. And he's awkward and, doesn't know how to like be with his own body. And and
that's what the character is. It's a young man-ish. We'll get to whether he's human or not, but just who doesn't know how to be around other people and does not know how to get in with these social cues that are being signaled. And
like we were watching it, and Elena, my wife, even asked, she's like, oh, does this she thought it might derive from some sort of old fairy tale, but I guess not. It just derives from Tim Burton's brain.
It's Tim Burton's brain with his love for, he actually did say in this book, he loves when like the mob gets the torches and goes for the monster. Like that, he loves stories that involve that trope of like the petty townspeople who can't understand the creature that's different. That's absolutely what this movie is. He definitely did not like growing up in the suburbs. And he had this really great quote that hit such a nerve with me that I wrote it down and I still have it. His quote was, growing up in suburbia was like growing up in a place where there's no sense of history, no sense of culture, no sense of passion for anything. You never felt like people liked music. There was no show of emotion.
That's actually really harsh.
It's super harsh, but like, look at his view of the suburbs. I mean, the people in this movie are not listening. Well, there's the woman listening to Tom Jones periodically, which actually works perfectly for this neighborhood, but like, they're just like gathering around the barbecue and like eating their weird Jell-O salads and gossiping about each other. But like, you don't get a sense like they come from a strong culture or that they don't have traditions. They're just a bunch of weirdos.
But there's something so whimsical about it that I didn't, and even more so as an adult watching it, I didn't really come away with hellscape probably for 90% of the movie until the mob turns. And then I'm like, oh shit. But until then, I'm like,
I mean, it does look like a very safe neighborhood for the kids.
I think it was less like safe stuff and more just every detail was just whimsical. And, with all the house colors, even like the car Diane Weiss drives is like this awesome, like banana yellow Mustang. Like everything was just so meticulously styled that it just looked it was just really fun to look at.
It was beautifully styled, but the colors are just nauseating.
Yeah, I guess they're nauseating, but they all kind of go together.
It's missing that classic Tim Burton, like black and white stripes.
Yeah. And you and I both live in the suburbs now. And I could say safely, at least in my neighborhood, we do not all have matching pastel barf color houses.
We don't. Once again, I live on a hill. And I can't see into my neighbor's windows, but
You're not calling your neighbors on the phone being
I
like,
do
what
have
was that?
I have a literal picket fence though. And
So we've covered some of the plot. Do we want to get into the characters? Should we
yes,
start with the main one? Johnny.
talk about Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
1990s Johnny Depp. What a heartthrob back in the 1990s.
I feel like he still is. No. I'm at the lesbian weighs in on the heartthrob, which doesn't make any sense. But
I don't want to go on too much of a tangent of recent events, but I feel like he's a little bit damaged goods lately.
Yeah. When I watched it, I actually forgot how good looking he is. It was like he's
even
very
as
good looking.
a young Tim Burton character, it's
feel
not
like,
as
though,
attractive now.
But at the time, though, even if like dudes aren't your thing, I mean, he's objectively a pretty face, and he was so. I think even at the time at the release of this movie, I mean, I'm sure teen girls went to go see this because he was in it.
God, yeah. No, he was like Mr. Tiger Beat magazine pinup.
Tiger Beat, amazing. I think I
had
a subscription.
Do you remember there was that John Waters movie, Crybaby?
Oh God,
that's what he did right before this, and he is so good looking in that movie. That movie's weird. We might have to do that movie too.
It struck me though for Johnny Depp is that I think a kid watching it today, I should actually have asked my daughter this question. I'm sure that any age kids would be like, I would recognize that this is an attractive person, maybe, although he's Edward Scissorhands. But at the same time, I don't think they don't necessarily know who he is. And if they do, he's Captain Jack Sparrow, or maybe he has some baggage for all the recent like personal stuff for him, if they even know who he is. So like, I guess it would be the same as like when you and I would watch movies with like Jimmy Stewart or Charlton Heston in it. Like we're not necessarily that, we didn't grow up with that same kind of, that's probably too old. I guess a better reference would be, oh God, what's his name? Oh, the guy from the 70s that I'm forgetting his name.
This could be literally anyone.
Like the
guy from the 70s.
He has a gross hairy chest. He died recently. Tom Selleck.
You don't know the weird like Pinterest version of gross hairy chest actors I just scrolled through in my head and did not land on Tom Selleck. Okay.
I guess what I mean by that is that Tom Selleck was before our time even. So
yes,
it wouldn't resonate with me like that he's a heartthrob or was a heartthrob, regardless of my sexual orientation.
No, I mean, he was like the dad on Friends for our generation.
Right. I feel like that was just something that probably was a key appeal for Edward Scissorhands that doesn't exist anymore.
Well, no, I mean,
I can't believe I went around to that to be like, the guy with the hairy chest. I was getting there.
From the 70s. For a lot of us, this was Johnny Depp's breakout role. He'd been doing kind of like, look at this good looking kind of bad boy from your high school characters, and then showed up in this as a completely original character. And I mean, he's amazing in this.
Amazing. I loved him in it. I loved him in it even as an adult now watching
my brain like detaches from the fact that it is Johnny Depp just because his mannerisms are so different and kind of just like that glassy look in his eyes. There's one line when I think it's when they're about to like break into Jim's house where he says something and it was like, oh, that just sounded like Johnny Depp. But it was like only one line of this entire movie does his voice sound like the actual actor. The rest of the time he's got that kind of wispy.
It's like sort of high pitched.
Yeah, it's kind of like a little bit of a whisper the way he's talking.
But he doesn't really talk that much. I mean, Elena and I were noting that like there's a lot of just like face and body acting that he does. And Edward Scissorhands, getting back to the whole like he's supposed to be somewhat socially awkward or representative of someone socially awkward. Like, he just agreed to live with an Avon lady after living in a castle his whole air quote life. So his whole awkwardness is really expressed in his face and stuff. I actually thought Johnny Depp like was great in this.
Yeah, no, he's just trying to figure out what is this weird suburban world, because he's literally known one person his entire life who died a few years ago.
Right.
And read him etiquette books, but like he's never seen a woman, never mind a teenage girl, never mind like the dog. This is all novel.
Yeah, it's all novel. And I think even just I think my son asked this, like my son got great enjoyment out of trying to watch Edward Scissorhands try to eat. So there's a scene where when, Edward is now living for some reason with the Avon lady and her family, and she has her husband and at this point in the plot, Winona Ryder hasn't showed up yet. They're having this like traditional dinner, and like Johnny Depp, or Edward Scissorhands cannot eat. Like he's trying to balance like a
Can't
single
pick up
pea.
utensils. Yeah.
Yeah. My son just sort of got a kick out of that. And then Elaine and I were like, well, does he eat? Has he never eaten before? Like, does he get hungry? Is he human?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think he's human, is he? Like, he's somewhere between a robot and a Frankenstein creature. There's an inventor up the top of the hill, played amazingly by Vincent Price. It's so good.
I know, the casting was amazing in this.
Yeah, he just, decides to make Edward one day, and it's not clear if he's made out of mechanical parts. Is there metal, or is he grown and pieced together from like something biological? I don't know. They never explain what he is, and I guess doesn't really come up.
Did you care though when you first watched it as a teen? Because I don't remember asking myself that question the way I did as an adult.
No, I think I probably was concerned though, like if he's up there and he's supposed to be eating and he's not eating and he can't pick up food, or is he supposed to be drinking water?
Right.
But he can't do it. Although this turned into a whole other level. And again, we had this watch party, but we were like, where's he getting the ice from up there? Like, is he got Amazon delivering big blocks of ice and making ice sculptures?
I totally had the same thought at the end. This is the end. Spoiler alert, everybody, when he's doing like a big ice sculpture of Winona Ryder at the end. I was like, I had the same thought. I'm like, where's he getting that? Did he invent is there a giant ice machine? Of course I go to the logistics. You can't exactly.
Does he have a mobile phone that he can tap with a pair of scissors and it's sensitive enough to pick up that he just ordered a whole block of ice?
Right. Or some sort of voice. He's like, Alexa, order me.
Oh, he's got an Echo.
Yeah, he probably has an Echo. Well, there's definitely a lot of uses for scissors that I forgot about for Edward's character, like whether it's like gardening, hairdos, and maybe sewing,
loose threads,
little robbery in there.
Shish kebabs. Oh man,
right. So many. There's a lot of uses, which essentially in the plot, that's what carries it through. Is to people are the neighbors. These gossipy turned villain neighbors are intrigued by Edward and sort of delighted with all the uses that for sister. Like people are lining up to get their haircuts and lining up to get their bushes done. So I mean, that sounds really terrible.
That did sound a little bit I won't even.
I mean, this movie could have gone I mean, I can imagine an SNL skit where Edward Scissorhands is given Brazilian waxes here.
There's probably a porn version of this somewhere where that's going on.
I almost want to just get you raise that, but it is what it is. I said it. Wait, what did I say?
you have editing power to go back and find out what you said and whether or not you want to.
I think I said get your bushes done. Oh, I'm going to try to say it again. It's going to get worse.
Moving on.
So
our other big stars in this movie, America's sweetheart, Winona Ryder, playing the daughter, Kim Boggs. The family is the Boggs. And they go to Bland High School, which I'd never noticed before.
Wait, I didn't notice. Wait, did you say Bland High School?
She has a pendant in her bedroom that says Bland High School. I didn't notice that. My neighbor Matt pointed that out and said, "Does that say Bland High School?"
That's so funny.
Yeah, she's playing Kim. She had just done Beetlejuice with Tim Burton, and she was very gothy, very Wednesday Addams-ish. And this movie,
she was Wednesday Addams-ish in that one.
Yeah, Winona's in a strawberry blonde wig and a cheerleader uniform this entire movie, which apparently she hated. She was yelling at Tim Burton the whole time, like, this character sucks. I don't want to do this. But, she's a good sport about it. She also plays the narrator of this movie, doing a slightly raspy grandma voice. Although I feel like her voice, now that she's playing Joyce on Stranger Things, her current day, at the top of my lungs screaming Joyce voice from Stranger Things would have been a funnier narrator here.
That actually would have been an amazing narrator, actually, to Joyce from Stranger Things. Yeah. I actually thought,
where's my boy? Where is Edward?
So comically old. As a grandmother, I was thinking she probably is supposed to be how old as what she is right now as her character in Stranger Things, and she does not. They made her as old and rickety as they come.
Yeah.
I don't even think my kids realized that was the Kim character.
I know when I was a kid, I didn't put it together
I don't
until
think I
like
did
my mom made
either.
a comment at
Made it
the end,
too
like,
old.
oh,
I
like,
almost didn't care about her as an old person, but I
no,
thought she was kind of the perfect teenager. I mean, she's embarrassed about Edward in a way that you could imagine most teenagers would be embarrassed if their mom just brought home some freaking rando with scissors on
stuck
their
him in
hands.
your bedroom and he freaking stabbed your waterbed to death.
Right. So there's like, the social pressure but she eventually stands up for herself on some level and comes into her own. I kind of felt like she was sort of the perfect immature but yet matures teenager in a way.
She's a little bit, I guess she's a little bit of a snarky, like, but this is your ideal teen from the suburbs.
Right.
She doesn't get to do a whole lot, so maybe I'm just reacting to that, but she's like a little bit bland, and Edward's definitely into her, but it's only probably because she's very pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it gets to the end and she actually stands up for him to the point of like they get in a huge fight with her boyfriend and like it's a battle to the death in the old mansion atop the hill. And like she threatens to kill the guy. Like she's like, I'm about to stab you. We've been going out for a few years here, but you're not my date for homecoming anymore. And that I really liked. I forgot that she did that. Well, no, one of my big pet peeves for so many movies in the 80s and 90s were like the damsel in distress, where like she like different characters who were shown like this lady can hold her own. Like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves is one where like Marian's a badass and she's fighting, but when they get to that final scene, she like forgets that she has all these like skills and like it's just like in the background.
Yeah.
Or like, I hate to say this, even the Princess Bride, like Buttercup.
I was just about to say Buttercup doesn't have many lines. You're right.
Like she could be doing more during a lot of the fight scenes, and she's more of a like clutch my skirts on the side and
right.
Kim, Winona Ryder's character here, like threatens to kill a dude and hits him over the head with a beam or a pipe or something. Like she takes him out at one point. It was just like, good for her. Like we need a few heroines who like knock people over the head like this. This is great.
Yeah, and I do remember her resonating with me probably when I was a preteen in some ways, because I do think she was that, to go from like the embarrassed typical teen all the way to basically a elite SEAL Team 6 with I'm gonna kill you is maybe a sudden transformation, but it's certainly an interesting one. Yeah, and she's flawed, and I think I appreciate that more as an adult. And she's flawed in that, a big key piece of the plot is that Jim, her toxic boyfriend, basically wants to rob his own house for money. It's all just like weird.
To buy a van.
So they could hook up in the van. It's very strange. And she goes along with it and lets Edward take the fall when they eventually kind of get caught. So there's a little bit, and I think my kids were a little bit like, why did she do that? And we, as parents, were just like, that's not nice. But at the same time, we shouldn't rob houses. So there's a little bit of like flawed character that I appreciated more as an adult. She's not stridently on the right side because she lets.
No, and she's definitely giving into peer pressure for most of this movie. And then finally
the end.
Snaps out of it.
She actually lived up more to me than I thought she was going to. Cool. Just because I had forgotten the end scene.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I forgot she's got a little fight in her, which is Let's talk about Diane Weiss because she played every single mom in the 80s. I feel like
she did.
She was in The Lost Boys. Is like, remember that movie? Oh, we got to do that movie. That movie's rated R, and we should not have been watching that.
Thanks for the warning, because you know me, I'll sit down with my kids and be like, "What is this movie rated?"
But yeah, no, she was like the mom in Parenthood. She was the mom in so many things at this stage in her career, and she's always she gave it 100%, no matter how weird the mom character was. And this one's super weird. What a character! She is an Avon lady. She's wearing all pastels with her little like prim hat, and she just goes breaking and entering into the weird mansion at the end of the street and brings home a monster. Like, oh, you should come home with us.
She's like, can you live with us?
So we were doing this watch party with my neighbors, and my neighbor Kathy said, she is simultaneously so stupid and so brave.
It's so true.
It captures her really well. Yeah, she does a lot of really dumb things, but she also like doesn't blink. She'll go right into your haunted mansion and right up the creepy stairs. And yeah.
Yeah, and it's sweet. Like I found her to be delightful. I mean, I had forgotten that she was the mom in this movie so much that I had forgotten about. And I was just like, oh yeah, I forgot she's in this. And I had the same thought. I'm like, I remember her as a mom in every movie in the 90s or 80s. She was also just sort of, probably purposely so, just this, oh, it'll be all right. We'll have a Christmas party. And it's like, oh, Peg, oh, honey,
I mean,
it's not all right.
this neighborhood has just beaten her down. She's not defeated by it. Like, she's going door to door, like, Avon calling, and they're all just like, no, get out of here.
Yeah,
Like,
she's
Peggy,
sort of
leave.
oblivious, though. She seems above the fray of the mob mentality. Like, I feel like if some other neighbor brought Edward home, she wouldn't be like calling, like, you know, showing up with her pitchfork or some shit. So let's talk about her husband.
Oh, Alan Arkin is so good in this
Totally
movie.
forgot he was in this.
I did too. So he plays Bill Boggs, which, what a name.
That's an unfortunate name.
He's super funny in this because he just is oblivious in his own way.
I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely. But like most of the husbands in this movie don't get a lot of lines. Like they at the barbecue have a few one-off lines, but like he's the only one you really see representing the guys in the neighborhood. And he just is sitting there with his feet up, watching his bowling, giving life advice without anyone asking for it. And
so true.
I think my favorite moment of him comes after, and we'll talk about this because it was one of the more cringe-worthy moments in the movie. Edward gets harassed, a little bit assaulted by one of the neighbors, and goes and meets the family at a diner and says something about like, oh, we went into the back room and then she took off all her clothes. And
that was such a funny moment. I cried.
Everyone in the family just turns and gapes at him like, what? And the father just keeps talking. He's like, well, it's good you're an entrepreneur now, Edward. Like, that's a big thing for a man. And like, just giving him this like blatant, like high level out of some motivational book kind of
He too
unnecessary.
Is also
oh, God.
Yeah. The Alan Arkin character wants Edward to sort of like carry his own weight with the family financially, which is like such a weird theme. But he's just such a toxic asshole. Like, all dads in movies, like what is up with the depiction of 90s dads? Like, I'm sure not all 90s dads are this toxic and assholey, but he was sort of
but this is like extreme suburbs, and like this is an extreme suburban guy.
So he's like sitting at the head of the table, and the Edward character is out trimming the ladies' bushes of the neighborhood. I'm just gonna keep saying it. And Alan Arkin's like, well, you know, did you get paid? And you know, Peg is like, well, you know, so-and-so baked him cookies. And his line is something to the effect of like, you can't buy the necessities of life with cookies. And I'm just like, you know what? Fuck you, Bill. Maybe you can. Maybe you can. Shut up.
But I still really enjoyed watching this character. I mean, he's just talking out of his ass the whole time, but like, it's so funny. Alan Arkin is so good at it. Behind there's like a wink and a nod and a like he knows exactly what he's doing with this character, and he's just making him comically asinine.
He really is. And there's like an oblivious nature to him that like, you know, he's like setting up the Christmas lights for this holiday party that his wife planned that no one's going to come to. We all know this, but he's dutifully out there setting up the lights, and he sees this is towards the end of the movie, and Edward runs away.
Oh, being like threatened and beaten up by the boyfriend.
Oh, right. Yeah. And someone's like, oh, Dad, did you see Edward? And Edward's like, oh, I guess he ran over there. Like, he's just so oblivious. It is funny.
Not picking up any cues. He's not listening to anybody.
Yeah. He's just like in his own world, like
talking, watching his bowling.
And for some reason, there's a lot of him watching TV outside. And I was like, why are we doing this? Like the TV is set up outside.
Well, he's doing yard work.
He's doing yard work. Actually, Johnny Depp is trimming his bushes.
Yes,
I can't stop.
You know, we have a weird turn for the actor Anthony Michael Hall. Who previously was always the dork character. Right. I mean, Breakfast Club and 16 Candles. I mean, he is Brat Pack original. Yeah. And he must have put on 100 pounds in this movie and is suddenly tall and like the biggest bro and the most awful boyfriend ever.
Yeah. He's definitely the guy that would spike the punch. And he's probably also the guy who would spike your drink at the bar. You know, he's definitely a creep.
Yeah, no, I mean, he, was going to Limp Bizkit concerts and
Yeah,
like
he's
was punching holes in the wall at the frat house. Like, he's a jerk.
totally.
I
He's
didn't live to end up doing any of those things, but
spoiler alert.
but he would have. But he
died.
would have. He was a Limp Bizkit fan.
Yeah, totally was. Or no, even worse, Nickelback.
He was a Nickelback fan.
And it's like he knows that Edward has a thing for Kim, who's his girlfriend, and he does all he can to just rub it in his face and sort of constantly trying to like demonstrate his manhood or some shit. I don't know.
He gets hit over the head by Winona Ryder eventually, and she threatens to kill him. And then he gets defenestrated at the end. Spoiler alert, right out the window. A very classic ending for a villain.
So speaking of villains, though, I cannot wait to talk about Joyce.
Oh, Joyce.
Played by Kathy Baker, who I guess played similar. I think she must have played similar roles in the 80s and 90s.
No. So like I remember her from Picket Fences.
Right. She was the same time. Yes.
And she's like a little bit like
totally forgot she was in that.
Mom. Like, yeah. Like in this one, she is full out like a sexual predator. She's setting herself up as like, she invites the repairman over and plays Tom Jones music and like, probably is breaking her dishwasher just to get the house call kind of thing. Like she's over and she's married. Her husband shows up at the barbecue. Remember they walk in together.
Oh my God. To me, she's unattached and she's just like the local hussy. I don't know.
No, I think she's just like the bored housewife. And she does have a husband who I think had one line in the whole movie, but they walk into the barbecue together and she's got her ambrosia salad there. But she's just, she's whatever just bored. Fuck that is. Yeah, she's bored with her husband and taking it out on everyone else.
So I had forgotten that she became the ultimate, essentially the villain, and I was delighting in her. Like in some ways, I was like, "Oh my God, I forgot about her." As I was watching this movie, she's the one that basically almost pretty much has an orgasm as Edward gives her a haircut, and she's
God, yeah, you see her toes curl up. I was just like, my wife and I looked at each other like, "Are the kids getting this?" I probably didn't get it at age 10. Yeah, it was kind of funny. It was but I think that's what's funny about the movie and fun to watch it as an adult to notice. Yeah, there's things tucked in there that as a kid went right over my head, but as an adult, I was just like, ew, did they just imply that? Oh,
I know. And it's like, but it's funny because it's like over the top. She's just so like, that was the most thrilling experience of my life. And
she's clearly was. And that's super sad and pathetic about this whole neighborhood.
I know. Pretty much don't be a housewife in this fictional hellscape of, I guess, what is supposed to be California in the 60s. But but because she is so intrigued by Edward, she's the one that gets the whole neighborhood enamored with Edward as well. Like she's the leader at first of Edward is the social currency, and she wants all of Edward's attention. She's the one that, eventually we'll get into, you've already touched on the cringiness of her essentially doing a slow motion.
She's the queen bee of the neighborhood, but she's making or breaking Edward, and it goes from making to breaking very quickly.
Yeah, and until she had basically, as soon as that scene happened when she was essentially harassing the Edward character and trying to seduce him, and he just runs away awkwardly, I had completely forgotten about that scene. And then the look on her face, I was like, oh no, I remember, she turns on him. She's the villain. Oh my God.
She is the villain. Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole use of the language of like, he almost raped me was like, I was like, oh, okay, we're getting into this with the movie. So for those who have teenage children, that's discussed in the movie. Yeah. It's sort of like the antithesis of Me Too, really, or at least Me Too with the genders reversed.
Can't lose your social credit with Joyce. Like she's running the neighborhood.
And yeah, as soon as she's trying to like not have too much egg on her face from that failed seduction, it's over because she's the queen bee. She gets all the neighbors basically rallied against Edward and how weird and dangerous he is. And I can't believe that Peg has him in the house with the teenage girl. There's so much implied there. But before that scene, I was totally delighting in her and thinking that she was just so funny. Those little touches of how ridiculous she is, I enjoyed.
Funny until it's dangerous.
Yeah. And before she got out the pitchfork, I enjoyed it.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So let's talk more about that scene though. That was like probably cringy for kids. For younger
Yes.
kids.
So I was watching this with Bella, who is 8, and she covered her eyes for that whole scene. So it's a scene where they're trying to
Lily did too, and Lily's
yeah,
11.
it's very uncomfortable.
And
And like
it's
you feel it
long.
coming too. The setup for this scene, if you don't recall this movie, Edward is trying, or I don't think he cares, but everyone else around him wants him to open his own business, like salon for styling hair.
Because
doing it
cookies
for
don't
free.
buy things.
Because
That's
cookies
why.
don't buy things. So he's setting up a proper salon. And this neighbor, Joyce, who is our toxic queen bee, takes him to give him a tour. And they're looking around the front area with the big open windows. And then she wants to show him the back room where she's going to model the smocks. And the second you get in there, it's like full of nude mannequins. And it's dark. And there's no windows in there. And right off the bat, it's just like, oh, something bad is about to happen here. And that's when, rightly so, Bella was like, I'm not watching this bit, like, and looked away and kept yelling over, like, are they done yet? And it was like, oh God, no, it's still going on.
And it's long. It's sort of almost excruciatingly long, especially if you're sitting there with kids.
And I do want to kind of give kudos to Kathy Baker, who's playing Joyce in this, because they stuck her in the most god-awful pantsuit with like very visible panty lines. And they've got the camera like right up her butt. It is the most unflattering shot I have ever seen. And she's trying to seduce Edward Scissorhands, who's kind of fallen back into, it almost looks like we're like a dental chair than
it does.
Like what you sit in a salon. Like he's kind of reclined and kind of trapped. And you just see her like weird pastel covered butt like going for him. And it's just so cringy and uncomfortable, but that's exactly what it's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be. And it's not dated. I wouldn't say it's dated cringy, but it's just cringy in how it's supposed to read.
Yeah, I remember it hit a childhood nerve with me, but even when we were watching the scene and then like it slowly builds towards like, now the neighborhood has a mob and they're coming for Edward. Like Bella at one point was like, that's not his fault. Like he didn't do any of this. And it was like, no, he didn't. Like some people are awful and they're going to make scapegoats out of the weaker person who doesn't talk very much because they're not going to defend themselves. Terrible life lesson, but I feel like it belonged in this movie as horrible as it is to watch.
Yeah. And I know we're sliding towards the ending here, but I guess I'm saying that I didn't put the pieces together that was really the trigger of Edward. Joyce is the one that takes Edward down, and it all comes back down to that scene essentially. I don't think I put those pieces together as a kid, and I'm not sure my kids did either. There's definitely what you were saying that Bella was like, you know, the 8-year-old you were watching it with was saying that's not fair. I mean, there's definitely what's happening? Like, why is this happening to him? All of a sudden, everything he does now is misunderstood. He was arrested for trying to break into Jim's parents' house. He actually saves the younger brother, but he cuts him, so it's misinterpreted that he attacked Kim's younger brother. So all these things started happening, and my kids were like, no, like I think there's a little bit of like almost anxiety, like, no, he's this isn't fair.
He's trying to do the right thing, and it just keeps adding up into the wrong thing. And yeah.
Okay, well, let's circle back to the other characters. Let's talk about Vincent Price. What you got?
Yes. Oh my God, I'm so amazed he's even in this movie. So for anyone who doesn't remember,
I forgot he was in it too.
Yeah.
I literally didn't remember any of the cast.
Vincent Price, who's at the end of his career, and what a career, who we all first knew as the voice of the Thriller song. I mean,
oh my God. I totally forgot that.
Yeah. So he's in this movie as the inventor. And he's this quirky, old, dapper man who runs, I guess it's a cookie factory, although like one of the machines seems to be chopping up cabbage at one point. Oh, there's just a lot going on.
See, you can make a living with cookies. I'm going to keep going back.
And cabbage.
And cabbage.
He's got this very steampunk looking.
It is steampunk. Yeah.
Like living room where all these machines are doing tons of stuff. And he essentially, he invents, creates, builds.
Gives birth to, I don't know.
Like, Edward appears suddenly and he is reading him etiquette books and showing him like how to behave. And like, It's so charming. I mean, I love that Vincent Price is in this movie.
See, I feel like I guess I could see the charm, but it was all just so tragic to me. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking that it was tragic even as a kid, just
Oh,
knowing that he dies and leaves Edward all alone
yeah.
before he finishes Edward. There's just something so tragic about it that I couldn't, it
No,
almost
it is.
overpowered
It's
the charm.
so tragic because, like, from the moment Edward is discovered by Peggy, the Avon lady, and she's like, "Are
Discovered.
you all
You mean
alone?"
when Peg broke into his
Would
house and
she?
made him
Yeah.
live with her?
So Peggy invaded the house and found there was a person in there. But she was like, "Oh, are you all alone?" And Edward just says, "He didn't wake up."
Oh,
And
I
it's just
know. It's devastating.
devastating the way he
Yeah.
says that. And you don't even know who he's talking about quite yet, but it just sticks with you like, oh, there was someone here and he didn't wake up. Like, oh my goodness. And then they start doing these flashbacks periodically when Edward's triggered by different shapes or like things that get his memory going. And you see this whole relationship between the two of them. It's very sweet, but it ends so tragically with like he's finally about to give Edward his hands and he has like a heart attack and you see him reaching for the hands. Oh, it's so dramatic. It
It
just
is.
hurts.
It definitely, I remembered that decades later, even though I remembered almost none of the cast beyond Winona Ryder and Johnny Depp. And it was still tragic.
One thing I noticed, I'm sure it was like something in Tim Burton's mind or like just the whole fabric of this neighborhood, but like at the barbecue and several other scenes, multiple characters keep coming up to Edward and going, I know a doctor who could help you. And then they just never follow up on it. It's just kind of this like know-it-all commentary with no action behind it. Like nobody's actually trying to help them. They just want to like say, I could help you.
I
And they
could,
don't.
I picked up on that too, and it sort of reminded me of The Graduate. How all of this might date. I mean, obviously it's before our time. Where like all of the older men in that movie keep telling Dustin Hoffman what to do with his life.
Like go into
Go into
plastics.
plastics. Yeah, it's sort of like that. Like I'm the
Yeah.
know-it-all. I'm going to give you this random advice and probably never follow up with anything.
In the same vein, they're like at the barbecue, one of the husbands comes up to him and is just like, yeah, I took a bunch of shrapnel in the war and is like showing him his like leg and everything. And it was just this like, I need to talk about myself for my own sake. Those moments hit me so much stronger as an adult, having been to so many barbecues or cocktail parties where people are just talking nonsense about themselves and you're just nodding going, oh wow, yeah,
Yeah,
good
there's
for
something
you.
about the social interaction between adults that I agree. I appreciated. It was fun to watch because it's all exaggerated in the movie, and it was fun to watch because I guess I related to it more. And I think that my kids, I would venture to say, are more focused on like the funny parts of like Edward having the shish kebab stuff on his hands and things like that. Whereas like I was, really enjoyed all the things that you're saying, like all the nonsense that
Oh my
people, all
God.
the stupid adults and getting haircuts and
If
having
you were
orgasms.
at that barbecue, do you want to talk to any of those people?
Oh my God, that's so true. I would probably want to talk to like Edward.
Who isn't talking back? He's just
Right.
staring at people like, why are you telling me this?
Yeah, I guess if I was at that barbecue, I'd want to talk to Peg and I'd want to be like, it's okay to not be okay. You don't have to take in strangers in castles and try to fix their face with your
And
makeup.
try to call the Avon headquarters to get the makeup mixture correct.
Right.
One thing this movie does really well, this movie is making excellent use of what's called AB blood, which I learned
I
about.
didn't know anything about this until you told me about it.
So there's this product called AB blood that I learned about because I worked in special effects for 1 year. I worked on the movie Shutter
Fun
Island.
fact about Wednesday Addams over here.
Yeah, worked with a lot of blood. So there's this product called AB blood. And when I was working on Shutter Island, my boss stuck his head in the office one day where I was working and was like, Amanda, can you get me 2 gallons of AB blood? Thanks. And left. And I
You're like,
was like,
fuck.
that's oddly specific. Like you wouldn't take O negative and you wouldn't take like
I know because AB's
B
like
positive. Like it turns out there's this special effect product and it's these 2 clear liquids. So you've got liquid A and you have liquid B. And when you combine them, they turn bright red. And they're the exact color red that you see all over this movie because you're dipping Edward's scissors into it and then you're putting, so that's the A blood, and then you're putting the B
Oh, does the bee go on the
liquid.
face?
Yeah, so like the A liquid is clear. You dip the scissors in that, and then the B liquid is going on Kevin's face or Winona's face or Johnny Depp's face. And then when they touch each other, they turn bright red and they drip down. It's a little bit brighter red than you see in some movies go for kind of like a darker, more grotesque red. But like you wouldn't really want that for this movie anyway, because it's a kid's movie and it's you don't want it to be like disgusting. But
it's a kid's movie the way Tim Burton does kids movies.
Yeah. But it does give the effect of like, oops, you accidentally just sliced your face with a pair of scissors. So I thought they used that really well in this movie. Like it's just enough to get the point across. Like, yeah, he's stuck with these very dangerous things on his limbs and he has no control over it. But, you know, this isn't Kill Bill, Quentin Tarantino, like the blood was everywhere. You know, we're not doing that. It's a tasteful amount of blood. It's so much of blood.
Restrained blood.
Yes. The finest amount of blood you could have in a kid's movie.
Right. So now we're sliding towards the end now, which I think we should address.
Yes.
And it starts with Edward being upset.
Yes, the mob is building. Joyce has turned the neighbors on him. Kim's boyfriend has threatened him and run him out of the house. And poor Edward goes on a Frankenstein monster like rampage through the neighborhood, only because he's such a like gentle creature. Really only involves like hacking off some topiaries and scratching some wallpaper. Like he's not that destructive. He's just mad.
As an adult watching it again, something I wouldn't have thought about as a kid, but I was like, oh, he just has never learned to control his emotions, like or deal with it.
And of course he hasn't. Like,
right.
When did that ever come up before? But I really love the moment he goes tearing through the neighborhood. You know, he's slicing off the legs of people's ballet dancer topiaries. And it's at that point kind of like, yeah, you know what? That looks stupid anyway. So like,
right. Cut the leg riddance. Yeah.
But he just at the end is like exhausted, sits down on a curb, and this big shaggy dog comes over and sits next to him. And like, he's in this moment of like defeat. And he just looks at the dog and he trims its bangs. The dog gives him a lick and runs away. It's just such a sweet moment.
Yeah, and I think for kids today, they understand why he goes on a rampage, right? Because we've already talked about the fact that like the kids we were watching it with were like, this isn't fair. So
yeah,
there's definitely a relatability. You know, there's basically, inevitably a showdown between. Showdown's the wrong way to put it. It's
the mob coming for the monster. Yeah, it's absolutely Tim Burton's favorite thing. Here comes the torches. Here come the pitchforks, and the innocent creature has to be run out of town.
And more specifically, Jim, sort of the other villain, the non-sneaky villain, unlike Joyce, is like there's like an inevitable confrontation there, where like. Basically, Jim realizes that Kim has feelings for Edward, or is at least
I don't even know if it's that he just doesn't like losing. Like Kim dumps him, and I think just the idea of losing.
But it all just sort of comes to a head and dark real fucking fast. I mean, there's pitchforks out.
The one thing though is that all of the people are dressed up for Christmas, and some of them are literally dressed as Christmas trees.
Oh my god, that's true. That is funny.
And so the angry mob is the dumbest looking angry mob of any movie I've ever seen.
Like they don't have pitchforks, they have cocktail dresses on. And I guess that is where it doesn't, and maybe this happened to the kids you were watching it with, it was at least with my kids, because I don't think that they assumed that it would end badly. Like they were just sort of like, especially because there's people with like cocktail dresses chasing Edward and it's not fair. So it still looks so ridiculous.
Edward Scissorhands and Kim and her awful ex-boyfriend at this point, Jim, all go racing up to the top of the mansion where the roof has already caved in, and dramatic fight to the death.
Yeah, and pulls out a gun. I mean, the gun
part I forgot he had a gun.
I forgot about that.
Actually, at that exact moment, I was like, he brought a gun to a knife fight. That's not fair.
That's not fair. Yeah.
There's no other way for it to end for Jim, who's been a jerk the entire movie. He's got to go out the window. And he does. But not before Winona hits him over the head with a beam and then like threatens to put one of Edward's scissors through his jugular vein. Like, she gets vicious, and I like it. I'm here for it.
You know, Wednesday Addams.
Yeah, let's be dark about this.
Yeah, and I was still actually, as the scene was unfolding, I was thinking, I don't remember how this ends. I have to say, I was even surprised that Jim died. I did not remember that he's ultimately killed in this battle and dramatically falls out the window. My kids were like, what the fuck just happened? Because I think for them, it was a faster, dark turn than they were expecting. Even though in the last episode, we talked all about how darkness is okay. And with all that and Dark Crystal, and there's this edge of the seat stuff with some of the movies of the era where it's like, well, maybe it's not going to be okay and it holds your attention. But for some reason, because of the ridiculous, maybe it's because everyone's dressed as a Christmas tree. People didn't think that, my kids didn't think it was going to end badly.
Every high school has that guy. And most of the time, he does not get thrown out the window.
Right. Most of the time, he just loses the girl. He doesn't. He doesn't get like
that would be justice enough. But
2 stories out of Imagine.
He brought a gun to a knife fight. So he's going out the window.
It didn't take away the enjoyment of the movie for me, but for my kids a little bit. I think it definitely went darker than they expected. And I think they were just, not that they're clutching their pearls. Obviously, we watch violent stuff all the time because I never check the rating of movies before I watch it with them. I mean,
the good guys killed someone here.
Yeah, the good guys killed someone.
He was unredeemable, but they kind of threw him out a window.
Yeah, they kind of did. So they sort of was a weird taste to have in their mouth at the end. But so what was the reaction for your watch party?
I don't think that affected anyone in our room so much as how Kim realizes the mob is down and that he's going to get blamed for everything. And she runs down and basically implies that Edward's also dead, that they killed each other. And she holds up like some mechanical stuff to be like, look, it's his hand. And
here's a scissor I found.
How could he live without this pair of scissors? That she leaves Edward there and goes on. And apparently he gets married and has kids, and they have kids, and she's now got a granddaughter in a ginormous bed, and she's telling this whole story too. The bed is really too large.
It's really too large. And Winona Ryder's just a little too old.
Some weird things going on in grandma's house here, but she never goes back to like visit him or check on him. And that struck us more as the tragic ending, was just like, she left him.
I didn't think too deeply really at the end, but yeah, as an adult, that hits me more too. My kids did not think that deeply about it. They were just sort of like, that was dark in their own kid way.
She could have like snuck up there at any time and just been like, hey, you doing all right? Do you need any snacks? Like, what's going on up here?
Like I said, it was tragic, but it didn't kill it for me. I didn't mind the ending because I think it was almost like a good ending in that she was like, we're just going to leave it as it was because maybe you're not human and we can't make this work anyway. So
maybe it's like Titanic, like when she dies and eventually he dies, that they get reunited at the perfect age of 18 with everybody standing around clapping in their weird Christmas outfits like, oh,
I'm still in my Christmas outfit from the 60s. My daughter wanted to sanitize it even further. And she even remarked that she's like, I think the movie would have been better as a cartoon or animated, not a cartoon, like a kid cartoon, but like, I'm putting words in my daughter's mouth now, but she's watched a lot of the Studio Ghibli kind of anime.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, I think so she was like, I think it should have been an animated. And that's, I think, what she meant by it. And I think I'm inferring a lot here, but reading between the lines. But I think for her, it would have softened the ending to have it for some reason be animated.
Edward's just up there with like his neighbor Totoro and
right. And Ponyo.
They're just like flying at night and being all weird with trees. Oh, I like that. It's spirited away to that castle up the
hill. Good reference. Okay, so time to score. Let's start with adults. So the scoring is 1 to 10, with 1 being garbage, 10 being Princess Bride, despite the flaws in Princess Bride that we might have thought about. What are you thinking for whether it lived up for you as an adult?
Oh, I'm being so cliche. I'm giving this movie another 8. And I do that a lot.
So I also wrote down an 8, which is high. I think it was really just a solidly good movie. I'd even watch it again. It's tragic, but I kind of almost like appreciated the tragedy more as an adult, which is weird.
Yeah.
So 8, so that 8 plus 8, so that's a 16 total.
Yes.
our second one, so the second piece of the scoring is, again, 1 to 10, 1 being garbage, 10 being Princess Bride. Does it live up to kids today or the intended audience? And I'd say that the intended audience was definitely, I think, kids, teens, maybe adults.
I need to break tradition here. This is not my rating. I asked Bella to rate this for me.
Okay. I should do that too with my kids. Good idea.
Originally gave it 1 rating and then bumped it up.
Oh,
so
gosh.
This is an 8.5, which
8.5.
8.5. This got a high rating, and I stand by that. I think this is an 8.5 for kids too.
Wow. So why so high? Definitely the highest kid rating by a lot.
I think the bookend of it feels like a fairy tale story, but you have this very cool world building with these crazy colors going on. I mean, we've been complaining about how the food and the houses and everything looks hideous, but it's a very specific place you're in. Cool characters, cool places, that the story is an underdog who's getting run out of town with the pitchfork people. And very kid-friendly movie with good morals. And
that's high.
It is high, but I've heard some comments about your rating maybe skewed a little low.
Yeah, so as usual, I'm going to go a little lower. I'm so harsh when it comes to this. Dear parents, sit down with kids and watch this because it's good. I think your kids will enjoy it. It's sort of a cop-out to say 5, but I'm starting with a 5. I don't think my kids enjoyed it as much as I did as a kid, and I think that's where I have a hard time going above a 5.
Okay. Did they enjoy it as much as The Dark Crystal?
So it's so weird. They were more enchanted by the Dark Crystal.
Because you went a lot higher on the Dark Crystal.
I did because I think they were enchanted by it. I really have to think of a rating beyond a 5, but it doesn't take away from the enjoyment. And I think it's not like some garbage i.e. Rudolph, that I don't know if I could ever like that movie, whereas it just totally goes over their heads and is terrible. And there's certainly movies out there that just they just don't live up and they're terrible. This one does for kids on some level, but it's not going to be, I just don't think it's going to be the one that they go to again.
Okay.
So 5 it is. So that's a 13 and a half.
Oh, I can tell you 13 and a half for kids because I have a spreadsheet.
You have a spreadsheet. Manager. 16 for adults.
16 for adults. This is our highest rated movie ever at 29.5. All right. Does this live up?
None of us want to say. I believe that it did.
I believe that it did. Wow. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to think if there's any argument against it. And I just don't think that there is. At the end of the day, it was delightful to watch this again.
Yeah. I just am happy watching this movie. It brought me back to a place and not a terrible one like The Dark Crystal did.
So golf clap for you.
Golf clap for Edward Scissorhands, the highest rated movie so far.
Yes, you have lived up. But if folks agree, they might agree, they might not agree. Please tell us we're full of shit. Or
who is going to fight us on Edward Scissorhands being a good movie? I will take that personally if anyone comes at us with that.
All right, well, everyone, come at Amanda with your criticism. But you could find us at Live Up Pod on all the socials. Not TikTok, but all the other socials, or liveuppod@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. Did we rate too high for the kids? Did we not rate high enough?
Jessica rate too low again?
Am I just the harshest bitch out there? Let me know.
And I want to send an extra thank you to the people who watched this movie with me. My neighbors, Kathleen, Matt, and especially Bella, who provided today's kids rating.
Thank you, Bella.
Great job.
For providing. You know what? I'm going to do that from now on and have my kids rate it. This is going to get wild, guys. Maybe they'll be less harsh than me.
Yeah, they'll finally be like normal numbers.
Normal numbers, not this 2.
She'll stop giving everything a 3.
So thank you, Bella, for the idea. Appreciate you as a listener. All right. Thanks, everyone. Till next time.